Every story of success has two versions. There is the short one, designed for conference stages, investor decks, glossy brochures, and promotional videos. And then there is the full version, the one that circulates quietly, in late-night emails, closed-door conversations, whispered warnings exchanged between entrepreneurs who have already been there and understand that the Middle East is neither a paradise nor a trap by default, but a terrain governed by a very specific logic, where spectacular opportunities coexist with equally spectacular risks, because the region seduces, with scale, with speed, with capital, with the promise that things considered impossible elsewhere can be arranged here faster, cheaper, and with fewer formal obstacles. And often this promise is real. Yet precisely this apparent ease is frequently the first warning signal. Wherever processes move too smoothly, the real invoice usually arrives later. The first and most underestimated risk is the illusion of formal simplicity. Company registration may be fast, licenses can appear in digital systems within days, bank accounts may be opened without major friction. At this point, many entrepreneurs make a critical mistake. They assume that if entry was easy, daily operations will be equally frictionless. In reality, the Middle East draws a sharp line between being invited in and actually playing the game. At the beginning, the system behaves politely, even generously. It shows its best face. It lowers barriers. But once a company enters the real economic circulation, invisible layers emerge. Legal interpretations, discretionary decisions, dependency on specific offices, officials, and personal relationships. This is not a market where knowing regulations is enough. It is a market where understanding how regulations are applied matters far more. The second risk lies in overestimating stability. Political continuity in the region is often mistaken for regulatory continuity. These are not the same thing. The absence of elections does not mean the absence of change, quite the opposite. In centralized systems, decisions can be made quickly and implemented immediately. Today, a sector is prioritized. Tomorrow, it is quietly removed from strategic focus. Today, a business model is welcome. Tomorrow, it is placed on a list of sensitive activities. For European entrepreneurs accustomed to gradual reforms and transitional periods, this can be a shock. Regulations may change without long adjustment phases. Support programs can disappear overnight. Interpretations of existing laws can tighten without public debate. Managing risk in such an environment requires a fundamentally different mindset. The third uncomfortable reality concerns the true role of local partners. In many countries, formal partnership requirements no longer exist, yet in practice, local intermediaries remain essential. They open doors, translate institutional context, facilitate administrative relationships, but they also introduce risk. A poorly chosen partner can mean loss of control, conflicts of interest, blocked decision-making, reputational damage, and, in extreme cases, the collapse of entire projects. In societies where personal relationships carry structural weight, ending cooperation is rarely simple or inexpensive. The fourth layer is legal culture. On paper, Middle Eastern legal frameworks often look modern, English language, and inspired by common law or continental European systems. In practice, enforcement operates within local power structures and relationship networks. Legal disputes are not only about arguments and documents, they are also about position, reputation, influence, and access. For companies accustomed to litigation-based conflict resolution, this creates tension. In many cases, de-escalation, negotiation, and compromise are more effective than formal legal victory, even when the contract appears clearly on one side. The fifth underestimated risk lies in labor markets. On one hand, the region offers access to a massive global workforce. On the other, visa systems, sponsorship structures, and employment dependencies create dynamics fundamentally different from European standards. Employee turnover can be high. Loyalty is often contractual rather than institutional. Entire teams may change faster than long-term business plans assume. Management culture adds another layer of complexity. Different attitudes toward time, different interpretations of responsibility, different hierarchical expectations. This demands cultural intelligence and adaptive leadership far beyond technical competence. The sixth risk is reputation. In a region where business and state structures are tightly interwoven, corporate image carries political weight. A careless public statement, a misunderstood social media post, a violation of cultural norms, even unintentionally, can trigger responses disproportionate to original intent. Companies operating in the Middle East must manage communication with far greater strategic caution than in Europe. The seventh illusion concerns unlimited demand. The narrative of regional wealth often leads to the belief that money exists for everything. This is false. Markets are selective, prestige-driven, and deeply hierarchical. Products and services that perform well in Europe may fail completely, or be perceived as too cheap, too mass market, too lacking in exclusivity. This requires deep localization, pricing strategy adjustments, communication redesign, in many cases, full transformation of go-to-market logic. The eighth structural risk is dependence on the state. The more closely a project aligns with government strategy, the greater the support it may receive, but also the greater the exposure to political shifts. Projects tied to national programs can grow spectacularly and be terminated just as abruptly when narratives change. For entrepreneurs, this means diversification is not optional. Business models cannot depend on a single contract, sponsor, or institutional patron. The ninth shadow layer is social structure, inequality, segmentation, legal and economic stratification. These are not abstract sociological concepts. They shape labor markets, social stability, corporate reputation, and internal organizational cohesion. Companies that ignore this context expose themselves to reputational crises and internal operational breakdowns. The 10th and most fundamental risk is false security. The Middle East is often presented as an island of stability in an unstable world, and in many respects it is, but this stability is managed, conditional, and geopolitically sensitive. It depends on political balances, commodity prices, and international alliances. Any business entering the region operates within heightened geopolitical exposure. Regional conflicts, sanctions, alliance shifts, all can impact operations faster and more violently than in European markets. This is why this chapter matters, because the Middle East is not a place for the naive, nor is it a playground for cynical short-term profit seekers. It rewards those who combine ambition with caution, vision with risk management, courage with preparation. Those who enter without understanding the shadows often leave disappointed, blaming culture, politics, or the system itself. Those who invest time in understanding local logic, relationship building, and strategic adaptation often discover that these very shadows create the region's unique competitive intensity. Where risk is high, reward often follows. The Middle East does not sell absolute security. It sells possibility, but only to those who understand that every promise carries a cost and every opportunity demands responsibility. This is not a market for everyone, and precisely for that reason, paradoxically, it remains so attractive. At the end of every grand narrative about expansion and globalization, one brutal question remains. Not, is it possible, but, for whom does it actually make sense? Because the Middle East is not a universal solution. It is not a magical shortcut to success. It is not a plan B for those exhausted by Europe, taxation, or regulation. It is a selective, demanding ecosystem, rewarding some and punishing others without mercy. And this is where true selection begins. The first group that consistently wins consists of scalable companies and entrepreneurs. those who think regionally or globally from the outset. The Middle East favors projects that can be replicated, expanded, and integrated into multi-market platforms, digital services, logistics networks, fintech infrastructure, B2B ecosystems, online education, industrial technologies. Wherever exponential growth is possible, the region provides fuel. Small, hyper-local businesses often struggle. Costs are high. International competition is relentless. Market tempo does not forgive slow organic growth. In this environment, companies either scale quickly or disappear. The second group of winners consists of firms capable of working with the state, not against it, not around it, but alongside it. The region is structured around national visions, mega-projects, and strategic development agendas. Those who integrate their offerings into these narratives gain access to capital, contracts, and infrastructure unimaginable in European frameworks. This is not a pure free market. It is a project-driven, state-coordinated capitalism. For companies that understand institutional partnership as part of business design, the Middle East can become a contract paradise. For those attempting to operate in isolation, it becomes an impenetrable wall. The third winning group is culturally adaptive entrepreneurs, those who listen, observe, and adjust, those who do not enter with colonial assumptions of superiority. The region does not reward arrogance. It rewards strategic humility, the ability to learn local rules, build relationships, respect hierarchies, rituals, and informal structures. This does not require abandoning personal values. It requires understanding that effectiveness demands a different communication and negotiation language. The fourth group consists of high-value providers, technology firms, specialized consultants, knowledge-intensive services, experts offering capabilities not yet sufficiently developed locally. The Middle East actively imports competence. It wants to build domestic ecosystems. Companies selling undifferentiated mass solutions often lose to global giants or state-backed local players. Those who are difficult to replace tend to win. Now, the reverse side. The first group that frequently fails are entrepreneurs running from problems, those treating the Middle East as an escape from taxation, regulation, or responsibility. This region is not a hiding place. It demands presence, energy, engagement. Those expecting remote management shortcuts collide quickly with reality. The second group of losers consists of those who underestimate entry costs, not financial, but psychological, cultural, and organizational. Relocating operations is not changing an email signature. It often requires rebuilding teams, products, workflows, and communication strategies. The third risk group includes companies dependent on a single revenue stream, one contract, one partner, one government program. In centralized systems, risk concentration can be fatal. The fourth group ignores legal and social adaptation. They transfer European templates without modification. They avoid advisory investment. They fail to build local teams. The result is often conflict, penalties, or reputational damage. The fifth group is mentally unprepared for speed and pressure. The Middle East operates fast, expectations are high, projects are intense. This is not an environment for slow adaptation cycles, which leads to the core conclusion. The Middle East is not for everyone, but it consistently rewards a specific entrepreneurial profile: ambitious, international, project-driven, institutionally literate, culturally adaptive, long-term oriented. It is not for those who want to survive, it is for those who want to build. This is why more companies now treat the region not as an alternative to Europe, but as a second strategic pillar. Europe becomes the stability backbone. The Middle East becomes the growth engine. This hybrid model increasingly defines long-term global expansion strategies. At the same time, more individual professionals, consultants, technologists, managers, creators, view the region not just as a workplace, but as a career acceleration platform. Proximity to megaprojects, access to capital, participation in sectoral transformation attract those unwilling to remain trapped in corporate stagnation. But even for them, the region does not guarantee success. It offers challenge. It proposes a deal. Enter if you are ready to operate at a higher level of risk and reward. Stay in legacy systems if predictability matters more than momentum. This is why the Middle East is becoming a testing ground for future capitalism. A laboratory where new state-business relationships, governance technologies, and market coordination models are being experimented with in real time. This experiment is not neutral. Its consequences will be global. Companies that establish strong positions today may become tomorrow's sector leaders. Those who hesitate will attempt to catch up in a world that does not wait. And Europe? This is not an ideological battle. Not a clash of civilizations, not a moral confrontation. It is a competition between governance models, between ways of managing capital, time, and institutional power. Europe and the Middle East now stand not as enemies, but as competing development platforms. One built on institutional stability, social compromise, and procedural governance. The other built on centralized authority, speed of execution, and aggressively pragmatic future vision. Europe governed through process. The Middle East governs through projects. In Europe, process is sacred. Regulations pass through committees, parliaments, courts, consultations. Everyone has a voice. This builds legitimacy, but diffuses responsibility. In the Middle East, responsibility is concentrated. Success has identifiable sponsors. Failure has accountable decision-makers. This creates risk, but also decisiveness. Europe operates within electoral cycles and budget frameworks. Long-term planning exists, but is repeatedly disrupted by political turnover and coalition instability. Infrastructure projects often take decades. The Middle East thinks in decades, but executes in months and years. Vision is long-term. Implementation is aggressively accelerated. This creates the psychological perception of constant motion, growth, construction, momentum. The role of the state marks another divide. In Europe, the state regulates. In the Middle East, the state invests, initiates, partners. This is not liberal capitalism, it is state capitalism. Risk culture differs as well. Europe minimizes risk through standards, compliance, testing. The Middle East experiments at scale, building prototype cities, energy systems, governance platforms. Some projects fail, others redefine sectors. The experimentation velocity is simply higher. Demographics add pressure. Europe ages. Labor markets shrink. Consumption stabilizes. Growth becomes difficult. The Middle East remains young, urbanizing, aspirational. Demand dynamics remain strong. Narrative differs too. Europe speaks of protection, regulation, risk containment. The Middle East speaks of transformation, mega projects, future building. Yet there is no simple winner. Europe still dominates in institutional trust environments, research, advanced medicine, complex industrial systems, long-term rule of law projects. The Middle East dominates where scale, speed, and capital mobilization matter most. Infrastructure, logistics, finance, urban development, digital platforms. Increasingly, the real strategy is integration. Research and legal centers remain in Europe. Growth operations shift to the Middle East. Stability meets acceleration. This signals a power shift. Not European collapse, but redistribution of global influence. The Middle East is not trying to become Europe, it is becoming an alternative, combining authoritarian decisiveness with capitalist efficiency, technology with centralized planning, luxury with control. For business, this is seductive. For politics, it is disruptive, because if this model proves sustainable, others will copy it, and they already are. This is not a trend. This is the beginning of a new phase of global economic competition, not between states, between world models.